Chapter 2. Ken stared at his wrists absently, almost as if seeing them for the first time. Why had he done it? That had been what Motomiya had asked him, as she waited patiently for him to gather his sluggish thoughts, as Daisuke attempted to start a fire in the old fireplace of an abandoned cottage they had found. As Daisuke had pointed out, staying in the forest where they could be attacked would not be the smartest move. The Lost Ones and their god were out there, and so was Demon, who would not hesitate to seek his revenge for trapping him there. They would be as good as dead if they ran into one of them. And so, until either the others found a way to open a portal, or until Ken had enough energy to open one himself, they were stuck here. Both situations weren't exactly pleasant. It would have been a different story if they had their partners, but they didn't, and it was all his fault. Again. What have I done? They had been in this dimension for about an hour now, enough time for Ken to think over what he had been doing the past 3 months. His mind had been sluggish, jumbled up even as he went through the waves of depression and inner torment. Millenniumon had been relentless in his verbal attacks. Ken, if he was being honest with himself, hadn't fully been aware of the motions of his actions. Now that his mind was clear, for the first time in months, Ken found himself utterly horrified. Ken could have left his son fatherless, parentless, just as he had been when he was younger. What had he been thinking? Ken loved Kuji with all his being. Why did he think Kuji would be better off without him? Why did he think dying was his only answer? And then it hit him like one of Miyako's slaps. There was only one person driving him to the point of insanity. One person who had wanted him to feel alone and lost and worthless until he had no choice but to either kill himself to save everyone he loved, or to give in to the cold, merciless darkness. Millenniumon. It was always him, wasn't it? Ken-kun? Ken blinked the tears and fogginess out of his eyes, not realizing he'd been gripping his wrists a bit too tightly, causing them to bleed slightly. Motomiya gently untangled his fingers from around his bleeding wrists and held them gently in her own. Ken looked into her eyes and saw nothing but unwavering love and trust. How? How could she love me? Ken couldn't wrap his mind around it. They barely knew each other. Sure, Motomiya hung out with them enough times to know that she was Daisuke's half-sister and an overall nice person. Ken liked to think that someday they could even be friends. But they didn't know enough about each other to even get close to that same level of closeness he had with Daisuke, Hikari, Lori, Miyako, and Takaru, let alone enough to have strong feelings for the other. Yet, she loves me. Ken struggled to swallow that knowledge, but he couldn't deny the completeness and peace he felt whenever she held his hand or hugged him tightly. Just by being in Motomiya's presence seemed to wash away the doubts, fears, anxiety, and insecurities that were trapping him. It was so strange, yet it made something flutter in his chest, a warmth he could not identify. Why? Motomiya repeated her question, softly, lovingly. How could someone so pure, so untainted, be in love with him? I can't fight him anymore. He says Who? She asked, softly, her big brown eyes still staring up at him. There was a sudden weight next to him, followed by a warm hand rubbing his back. Ken could feel Daisuke's concerned gaze burning into his soul. With the two of them there, showing so much love and support, and offering so much safety and protection, Ken could not stop the sobs. As he sobbed, Ken told them of the pain his former girlfriend had left in her wake. He told them of the numbness and depression that had quickly taken over as he talked about the last 3 months. Hours must have gone by as he talked about his merciless tormentor. Ken could not sleep without Millenniumon being there to mock him, insult him, break him. And Ken couldn't be awake without Millenniumon being there, with words ready to chip at the protective wall Ken had surrounded himself in. Millenniumon knew how to break him. He knew Ken's pain, Ken's fears, and was using it against him, breaking him until there was nothing left but loneliness, unimaginable pain, and suffering, and endless darkness. "That asshole!" Daisuke cursed as he silently seethed in the kitchen, rummaging through the cabinets. "He's lucky I can't see or touch him. If I could, there would be hell to pay." Julieanna lifted her gaze to see her brother opening another cabinet. They had been here for a little over 3 hours now, without a way to return home. This had not been the plan. Daisuke had been horrified to learn just how bad Ken's depression had gone, and that his fiancée had known and hadn't cared if Ken died or not. She had been hoping for it. It had all crashed and burned in a matter of seconds. After canceling off the wedding, Daisuke had been determined to talk to his dear friend that he saw as a brother and get him to open up like he used to do in the past. Once that was done, he would then force Ken to eat something. The single father had not eaten anything in weeks, maybe months. Daisuke was determined to fix that. Shame that the plan was spoiled by their predicament. Julieanna returned her gaze to Ken, who was fast asleep on the sofa, his head resting gently on her lap. She ran her fingers through his bluish-purplish locks. It was no surprise he had passed out shortly after he opened up to them. He was both mentally and physically exhausted from his daily torment. "I wish there was something I could do to help you." Knowing that the one she loved was being tormented day in and day out by an entity she could not see or hear was maddening. "Aha!" Julieanna glanced up again to see her brother with a cooking pot, a few bowls, several 2-liter bottles of water, canned food, and something that looked like half-eaten apples. Julieanna wasn't too surprised that there wasn't much in the small cottage. It was pretty much abandoned, yet still in perfect condition despite the vines and trees that surrounded the cottage. "Anything good?" Daisuke glanced back at her and shrugged. "Just a few cans of beans and some strange apples, though I don't trust them either. Guess we were stuck with those chicken-flavored ramen packets you had on you." She had been the only one to have any sort of food on her. She had made it a habit to carry a few packages of ramen soup, protein bars, and a bottle of water in her purse whenever she went out. Although I would have preferred making Ken something that wasn't from the dollar store. She snorted softly. "So sorry. I didn't inherit Father's cooking genes, unlike you and June." She was like her mother, sucking at anything that wasn't a sugary pastry. She had lived on fast food, dining, and dollar ramen for so long that she'd actually forgotten what actual food was. "You know that's not what I meant," Daisuke said, pouting slightly at her, knowing that Daisuke and June were not on speaking terms with their father. "I know. You want to make Ken-kun something more sensible to eat." She frowned slightly. He was thin, much too thin for her liking. "I don't trust this world very much. Creeps me out, actually. But we gotta make the best of the situation, right?" Daisuke smiled and nodded as he prepared their meal. A peaceful silence took over the room, allowing her to look around. The cottage reminded her of one of those black mountain cottages she had looked at a while ago. The open, spacious room consisted of a family room where the fireplace was located, a kitchen, and a dining room. On one of the far walls were barn doors that led to the master bedroom, and ladders that led to the upper floor, to what she assumed was another bedroom. The small cottage would have been a nice place to live if it weren't for the danger just outside their door. The sound of an explosion was heard in the distance. They were lucky Demon and Dagamon hadn't spotted them while passing through the abandoned town of Innsmouth, unnoticed. Although, in their defense, the two were in a full-on battle against each other, with no side seemingly gaining the upper hand. It was almost as if Dagamon was holding back, allowing the other to vent. Their presence wouldn't go unnoticed forever, she realized. The lost ones were still out there, just waiting to attack them. What to do? What to do? She glanced at Ken with a heavy heart. For once, she wished she weren't so useless. He held Kuji in his arms, frowning as he entered the apartment he shared with his girlfriend. Kuji had been a bit unwell for the past week. He wasn't going to lie. He had been a bit worried. But it was just a cold, the doctor reassured. They just had to continue with the remedies they had been doing for the past few days. That did not put him at ease, though. Kuji just refused to sleep, and his appetite was greatly lower than his brother's. His fever was what really concerned him. Ken had been freaked out a bit when his temperature became 103 the night before. He had stayed up all night and all day watching over the sick child. Now all he wanted was a nap. Ken silently closed the door behind him. Tsubasa had not replied when he called into the silent apartment. Maybe she had put Koichi down for a nap and had decided to take one herself. God, they both needed it. Kuji's cold had been stressing both of them out. Kuji fussed in his arms. "It's okay," Ken whispered into the quiet room. "Papa's got you." He smiled as he made his way into the kitchen. It had been a good hour or two since Kuji's last meal, or at least it had been the last time Ken had attempted to feed his sick child. Kuji hadn't found food very appealing lately. "Are you hungry?" he asked as he opened the fridge. A brow raised slightly. It was truly odd how one child could handle breast milk, while the other couldn't. It was a bit of a struggle to manage the feeding schedules for both boys, but it helped to separate their bottles on separate shelves. On the second shelf was Kuji's pre-mixed formula that his parents had been so nice enough to get him each month, while the third was where the pumped breast milk was. All of those were gone. Odd. Koichi must have really been hungry, he thought as he grabbed Kuji's bottle. Once the bottle was warm enough for Kuji to drink, Ken went to the living room, where Kuji's crib was, and where he had been sleeping the last couple of days. They had to separate the boys' cribs so Koichi didn't get sick too. It really was a stressful arrangement. Kuji fussed and fussed in his arms, not wanting the bottle his father was trying to feed him. Ken silently coaxed him, silently encouraging him to drink a little for a good half hour before the boy finally took a few gulps of milk. But that was all he took. Satisfied for now, Ken tried to lower the baby to sleep with a lullaby his mother always sang to him when he was little. "Tonight we won't count sheep. Count the ways that I love thee. Count all the things that ever made you smile. Just rest your eyes a while. Tomorrow's a new day. It may feel so far away. I'll always be everywhere you are. So rest your peaceful heart. Go to sleep, my son. Be still, my little one. You're one step closer to the man that you'll become. Another day is done." As he sang to his son, Ken could not help but notice an evil presence lingering in the hall that led to his bedroom. As soon as Kuji fell asleep, he went to investigate. The apartment was silent as he walked through the hall, almost to the point of it being empty. As he entered the bedroom, the first thing he noticed was the missing crib. along with some of Tsubasa's belongings. A cold, sickening feeling filled his chest as he picked up the note that was left on the bed. Tears formed as his heart stopped beating.
Did you really think she loved you, insect?
Millenniumon hissed in his ear. The room grew cold and dark, almost as if it was melting away, shifting into a familiar beach. She has to. We've been together for so long. We have kids together. If she hadn't loved him, why did she stay with him for so long? Why did she willingly move in with him? She didn't have to. She could have said no. She could have told him that she wanted a break. He would have given her the space she wanted. She didn't.
Then why did she leave the boy behind?
Ken didn't have an answer. The letter made no sense. He had seen the love in her eyes, in her body language. She had been so happy to be having his kids. They had even talked about marriage not long ago. So why did she leave?
She simply pitied you. She never loved you. Not completely. Not ever.
Ken closed his eyes as he felt the wounds that had been trying to heal reopen and grow bigger with each poisonous word. The more he thought about his relationship over the past few years, the more he began to realize something. Why are you here? You got what you wanted. We're in the world of darkness. What more could you possibly want from me? Red eyes glared down at him as Ken stood on the gray sand, staring up. The waves swayed gently, innocently, as the two enemies pair off against each other, one on the sand, one over the calm sea.
You, he said. Since the moment I saw you, I knew you would be a threat to me. You have this sickening ability to encourage others to forget their fears, their inner darkness when fighting against me. The fact that you can create and recreate those digimentals is maddening.
As the evil Digimon seethed, memories of the past filled Ken's mind. Not every memory of that time returned. The Holy Beast's spell was still in place, causing pain to shoot from his temples to the back of his head. However, those memories reminded him of why he had been fighting this monster for so long, why he continued to fight him alone, and the people he was desperate to protect. It's a shame you failed to kill me then. Unknown to Ken, the crest of kindness and the Digivices and D3s of his friends glowed and beeped in synchronization with his own beating heart. As long as I stand, I will fight you until my last breath. Ken knew what he wanted. If he couldn't take over Ken's body, then he would kill him so he could escape his prison. That was the reason he wanted to go to the world of darkness. He wanted to escape his prison so he could continue what he started. You can try to break me, but I will always find my way back. You can try to destroy me, but my friends will always be there to help me before I am completely gone. And even if I am doomed to face you alone, I will not stop. I will continue to fight you until either I or you die. He screamed.
We'll see about that.
But before Millenniumon could attack, Ken was whisked away from the dream world and back into reality. Ken-kun, wake up! You're having a nightmare! Ken's eyes flew open, his heart racing, his eyes filling with tears, as he glanced around his surroundings frantically. He did not recognize anything. Where was he? Ken-kun? Ken felt her hands on his shoulders, rubbing it gently. The tension had slowly faded away as he remembered. Right. They were within a cottage Daisuke had found. You alright, Ken? Daisuke was now in front of him. His brows were furrowed slightly as he held his hand, his eyes searching. Daisuke's heart beating in tune once again with his own was a great comfort. I think so, he said, a shaky hand running through his hair. Daisuke frowned. That dark aura was Millenniumon, wasn't it? Dark aura? It was Ken's turn to be concerned. What dark aura? There was this dark aura around you, Moromiya said, uncertain. We tried to wake you, but you didn't seem to hear us. At least, not until your, what did you call it? Crest. Your crest started glowing. I'm not certain what happened between you and Millenniumon, but whatever you did enraged him enough to take on this black, shadowy form, and left through the entrance. What? Ken shot to his feet. We have to go after him. We have to stop him. Ken soon regretted the sudden movement, as a wave of dizziness and fatigue engulfed his being. If Daisuke hadn't caught him, he probably would have fallen. You aren't going anywhere, said Daisuke. You are in no condition to fight some crazy lunatic. Ken was frantic now. Only he really knew what Millenniumon was capable of. Only he knew the danger they were all in. This world would only make him more powerful. He had to stop him before it was too late. But I have to. You don't understand. He's dangerous. You have no idea how dangerous he is. I know I don't understand. Silence filled the room after Daisuke's outburst. It wasn't unusual for him to blow up in anger like that. He and Miyako fought a lot, and often. It had not ceased even as they got older. But it was unusual for him to yell at Ken like that. He rarely yelled at him, rarely screamed. And if he did get angry, he normally didn't let it get to him. Daisuke knew how to talk to his best friend without the use of violence and yelling. I know I don't understand, Daisuke repeated after taking a moment to calm himself. I can never really understand the horror, the trauma you must have faced all those years ago. I only know from what Janai and Taichi and the other told us, and that may not even be enough to give me the full picture. The others barely fought Millenniumon. They barely lasted a minute before being imprisoned by that monster. And I'm sure Janai didn't tell us everything. I know he was hiding a lot of stuff from us, and we may never know what truly happened. Daisuke looked at him sadly. Only you and Akiyama-san really know what it's like to face that monster. And you can barely remember that time. I don't think I'll ever be able to understand the bond you guys shared, nor how much it must have hurt to have your friend ripped away from you by deceit and lies when you needed him the most. But Daisuke had almost lost Ken. Ken had almost been ripped away from him by death and the cruel god. Ken tried to ignore the guilt that realization caused. But that isn't going to stop me from helping you. We will stop that monster for good, but we can't be rash about this. Demon and Dagamon are still out there. Without our partners, we are sitting ducks. There's no way we can survive against 2 Digimon, and whatever those fake Digimon are, with the way we are now. We need to be smart about this. Ken frowned and nodded, knowing he was right. It would be wise to lie low and create some kind of plan. It was just the 3 of them right now. You're right, he admitted softly, mentally beating himself up for how stupid he was being. What was I thinking? Ken, Daisuke said with a bit of firmness in his voice. You have been fighting Millenniumon alone for so long that it's just second nature for you to go after him. You are only doing what you think will keep the rest of us safe. He smiled. Tell you what, why don't we talk about this over some food? I'm sure with the 3 of us we can at least figure out what our next move will be. Ken nodded and smiled a true smile for the first time in months. I am a bit hungry. A bit? Daisuke let the comment hang between them. letting Ken know that Daisuke did not believe him for 1 second. Ken hadn't really found food appealing in the last couple of months, and he was sure it was going to bite him in the ass. As the two made the short distance to the table, where 3 sets of bowls were set up, Moromiya screamed. The two chosen froze. Had the Lost Ones found them? Had Millenniumon returned to continue what he had started? Daisuke grabbed a worn-looking bat that had been resting against one of the nearby walls and spun around in the direction of his half-sister. "What is it? What's wrong?" Moromiya was frozen in place. Her mouth hung open slightly, but she was not able to form the words she wanted to say. And then a white blur zoomed out from under the sofa and across the floor. The white blur went from the sofa to the table, to the kitchen, and back to the sofa. The way it moved was almost as if it was trying to find a different hiding spot, away from the screaming female that had caused its frantic escape. Without warning, Daisuke swung his bat at the threat, most likely believing it was one of the Lost Ones. "Daisuke." "Stay back, Ken, I got this." He swung and swung at the white blur. The white blur squeaked in distress as it tried to avoid the attacks of its attacker. A chord struck within him as he realized what this blur was. "Daisuke, stop!" But it was too late. Daisuke managed to hit the small creature, causing it to skid across the floor and into the bedroom with a loud thud. Enough! Fatherly instincts kicked in as Ken snatched the weapon out of Daisuke's hands, while inadvertently pushing the other to the ground. The two siblings looked at him in shock. "Ken, what?" With strength Ken probably should not have in his current state, he all but threw the weapon across the room, causing it to snap in half. "Ken!" With a glare that caused the two to shut their mouths, Ken marched, like the overly protective father he was, to the dark bedroom. Ken looked around the room for a brief moment, before speaking in a soft, gentle tone that he always used with his own son. "Where are you?" There was no response. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." There was a small squeak then. No, that wasn't right. It was a sob. A sob from a baby. Ken got on his hands and knees and looked under the bed. There, sobbing, was a ball of white fur. The small baby looked at him with tearful, fearful eyes. A small bump was starting to form where Daisuke had slammed the bat into him. "It's okay. Shh." Ken made soothing noises to calm the frightened child. It took a bit of coaxing to get the baby to leave his hiding spot, but once he was out, he would not leave the comfort of Ken's arms. The baby sobbed into Ken's chest, still shaken from the encounter. "It's okay. It's okay." Ken gently ran his fingers through the soft, fluffy fur. "Did we scare you? I'm sorry." Ken frowned, realizing the baby would not stop crying in distress and fear. Maybe some food would help. That must have been what caused the baby to leave his hiding spot in the first place, and had only been frightened when Moromiya spotted him. "Ken-kun?" Moromiya lingered just outside the door, looking uncertain if she was welcomed or not. "Come," was all he said to her as he walked to the kitchen. Daisuke was there, stirring the pot of soup. "Do you have enough for a fourth?" Daisuke looked at him and blinked at who was in his arms, still sobbing, still shaking. "Is that a—" "Yes," he said stiffly, maybe a tad coldly. "You hit him pretty hard." His face fell. Daisuke had only been doing what he thought was right. He had put it upon himself to protect his sister and his best friend. How was he supposed to know that he had unknowingly attacked a baby Digimon? "Daisuke," Ken said more calmly, more tiredly this time. "You didn't know." "But I heard him. A baby." Guilt was thick in his voice, so thick that the small baby took notice. You were only trying to protect us. I can't fault you for that. Just help me try to calm him down. I'm sure he only came out because of the food. The only Digimon that were supposed to be here were Dagomon, his servants, and Demon. It made him wonder if this Digimon was one of the 5 Digitamas that had gone missing shortly before the reboot. At the mention of food, the baby looked at him with wide, innocent eyes, his sobs forgotten for the moment. Yuki? Hungry, little guy? Ken asked, with a smile that was so soft and so fatherly and kind. The little baby smiled up at him as a child would to its father. His heart clenched a bit, realizing that he had left Kuji at home, alone, and that Koichi was gone and out of his reach. Yuki! Yuki! Daisuke laughed. Go to the table, I'll bring the food over. Ken did as he was told, taking a few ice cubes with him on the way. Ken placed the baby on the table in front of him, given that the baby only trusted him at the moment, and placed one of the ice cubes on his bump. The baby leaned into the ice cube happily. What is he? Moromiya asked as she took a seat at the table. She had never truly seen a Digimon up close before. Yukimi Botamon, Ken replied. If memory serves me right. He's an ice subspecies of Botamon. Yukimi Botamon prefers cold places, unlike normal Botamon. That's why you usually see them in snowy mountain ranges or places that are really cold. So, why is he here? Yuki! Said Yukimui Botamon. The 2 humans looked at the small Digimon, noticing sad eyes. Wormmon once told me that several Digitamas had gone missing before the reboot. They believed some of these distortions that Yggdrasil caused while attempting to recreate the digital world may have sent some Digimon to other worlds other than our own. And this little guy was sent here. Daisuke placed a bowl on the table, followed by the pot of soup. That's my assumption, anyway. You may not be far off, Daisuke said as he scooped the soup into the 4 bowls. Daisuke placed a normal-size one and a slightly smaller one in front of him. Yukimi Botamon looked at the steaming bowl of soup. He did not go near it, despite the small grumble from his small tummy. What's wrong? Daisuke looked at the small Digimon, puzzled. Don't you like soup? They all noticed the way the Digimon was looking up at Ken, that of a child looking up to their parent for guidance and reassurance. It was very cute and soothing, in a way. The small Digimon's presence seemed to fill some of the void his ex had left with her sudden departure 3 months ago with their firstborn son. The ache returned, but with Moromiya and the small Digimon here, it was more manageable than before. Ken smiled at the baby. What's wrong, Yuki? Is it too hot? He was rewarded with a small squeak, followed by a very perplexed Daisuke. It shouldn't be that hot. It's been sitting on the stove for a bit. How much do you know about Yukimi Botamon, Daisuke? Daisuke leaned on his chair for a moment as he ate some of his soup. Well, Taichi mentioned once that Agumon evolves from a Botamon, and we saw a few at the Village of Beginnings. He looks like a Botamon, Daisuke said, gesturing to Yukimi Botamon. But only white. Yes, well, Yukimi Botamon are slightly different, Ken said as he put 5 ice cubes in the small bowl, stirring it absently as it melted. Botamon are like any other Digimon. They will eat anything and can live in pretty much any warm environment. But Yukimi Botamon are the ice variations of Botamon. They prefer colder environments. That's why they are cold to the touch. Daisuke nodded in understanding. Okay, I get that, but that doesn't explain why he doesn't want the soup. He seems pretty hungry. Yukimi Botamon are weak against heat. Ken tested the soup, which was now cold from the ice cubes. How's this? Yukimi Botamon shifted closer to the bowl, allowing Ken to scoop some of the broth, and put it into the baby's open mouth. The baby bounced happily before slurping the soup on his own. The adults all smiled as they enjoyed their meal. Ken wasn't sure how much time had come and gone, eating, talking quietly, and resting here and there. It was peaceful, something he had not felt in a long time.
How long do you think he's been here?
Moromiya's voice echoed throughout the small cottage, breaking the silence that had fallen between the three of them. Ken gazed at the sleeping baby Digimon cradled in his arms. If Yukimi Botamon had really been one of the few who had disappeared from the village of beginnings, then it would have been almost 11 years. 11 years alone. 11 years scared and terrified and hungry. Ken's heart clenched. The world of darkness was not a scary or dangerous place, as others believe. It was very much like the digital world. There were Digimon here, just not the Digimon they were used to. The lost ones were once Digimon. They were not as evil nor corrupted as Hikari made them out to be. They were stuck in those forms. Although, Ken couldn't figure out how he knew this. The only other Digimon, other than Demon and Dagamon, was a flock of Airdramon and someone else he could not remember.
I don't really want to think about it,
Daisuke said as he typed something in his D terminal. They all ignored the sudden shaking of the cottage. Demon and Dagamon had not stopped their battle, and Ken honestly felt guilty about it for some reason. The spell that Millenniumon had mentioned in passing was still there, still blocking memories that Ken desperately wanted to remember. The holy beasts had been so desperate to hide something from him, but what? And why did it feel like their fighting was his fault?
Damn!
Amethyst orbs shifted from staring at the small baby to brown orbs. What did Hikari-chan say?
She can't open a portal, and Kushiro-kun is trying to open one but no such luck.
It was no surprise that Hikari couldn't open a portal. Hikari may have been to the world of darkness before, but she did not have a connection to it. Not like him. The world of darkness had always felt like home, like he had been here multiple times, long before he had met Wormmon. Ken had a deep connection to this place, but he couldn't figure out what.
Taichi and Yamato are trying very hard to prevent your brother from murdering someone.
The only memory he could make out clearly was of a room underneath the lighthouse. Something was in that room, something the holy beasts had not wanted him to remember. I think we should go to the lighthouse.
Lighthouse?
Daisuke asked, incredulously.
Isn't that on the other side of the beach?
Where those Digimon are?
Ken nodded. I know it sounds crazy, but there's something there that can help us. I have these memories of me being there when I was younger.
Do you know what's there? Daisuke asked.
Not really. The spell is blocking that part. Spell? They asked. Ken grimaced. After I got hit by the Dark Seed, I lost certain memories of my time in the digital world. Janai said it was because of the Dark Seed, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Daisuke frowned. The holy beasts don't want me to remember something. They placed a spell on me when I was too weak and vulnerable to protect myself.
What? Why would they do that?
Ken shook his head at his best friend. Ken had known all the holy beasts once upon a time, during the war. But once they stopped Millenniumon for them, something happened. Something he couldn't remember. They were protecting their own asses, he said, a hint of anger in his voice for some reason. They would do anything, even sacrifice their own warriors and subjects to protect themselves. Daisuke silently seethed, but said nothing more.
Is there a way to break this spell?
Noramiya asked, hating that the man she loved was hurting so much still. I don't know. There's something underneath the lighthouse. I can't remember what, but I think it could help us with Millenniumon.
All right, Daisuke said after a very long moment. Let's go to the lighthouse then.